The observer stood at the edge of the ruined city, silent, watching the smoke rise into the gray sky. The ground still carried the scars of old wars, but this new battle was different. It was not just a fight over land or power. It was survival. Humanity's survival. From a distance, the humans looked strong. Their voices carried across the broken streets. They shouted to each other, lifted weapons, and stood shoulder to shoulder. To anyone else, it might have looked like courage. To the observer, it looked like desperation. Their eyes were wide, not with victory in mind, but with fear of what was coming. The enemy was near. Its presence was felt before it was seen. The air grew colder, the silence heavier, and even the bravest soldier felt his heart tremble. The humans tried to hide their fear, gripping their rifles tighter, pulling their helmets down, whispering prayers under their breath. But fear has a way of showing itself, even when men try to bury it deep inside. The first sound came, a sharp, cutting roar in the distance. Then shadows moved across the broken buildings. The enemy was larger, faster, and more ruthless than anything humans had faced before. The observer knew, in that instant, that the humans were already at a disadvantage. Yet still, they raised their weapons. Still, they shouted battle cries. Still, they fought. When the clash began, it was chaos. The sound of gunfire cracked through the air, smoke rising with every shot. Explosions lit up the streets, shaking windows that were already broken. Men and women rushed forward, screaming as they fired. Their courage was undeniable, but courage alone could not match what stood against them. The enemy moved like a storm. It cut through lines of soldiers as if they were nothing more than paper. Shields broke, weapons shattered, and screams filled the air. Still, the humans kept fighting. They reloaded, they pushed forward, they refused to fall back. Every soldier wanted to prove that humanity would not bow so easily. But the observer could see the truth. Every time a human fell, two more tried to fill the gap. And every time they stepped forward, the enemy crushed them again. It was not a fair fight. It was not even a fight at all. It was survival against something unstoppable. Some soldiers tried to inspire hope. A captain shouted orders, his voice strong even as blood ran down his arm. Another soldier carried a wounded friend on his back, refusing to leave him behind. There were moments of bravery that could move even the hardest heart. Yet bravery without power only delayed the end. The streets grew darker as the battle raged. Fires burned in the distance, painting the sky in shades of red and black. Bodies lay where they fell, their weapons still clutched in stiff hands. The cries of the wounded echoed through the ruins, mixing with the thunder of weapons and the roar of the enemy. From above, it might have looked like ants fighting against a flood. No matter how hard they struggled, no matter how many times they stood back up, the wave kept crashing down on them. The humans were fighters, yes, but they were also fragile. And the enemy did not know mercy. The observer felt something heavy in his chest. He had believed in humans once. He had thought their spirit was their greatest weapon, that their unity, their fire, would be enough to carry them through anything. But as he watched them stumble, break, and fall, he realized he had been wrong. They were not fighting to win. They were fighting to delay the end. Each life lost was a few more seconds for the others. Each brave stand was only a small wall against a massive storm. The truth was cruel, but it was there, written in every cry, every step, every last breath. The humans never had a chance. And yet, they did not give up. Even as the ground shook, even as shadows closed in, even as hope slipped through their hands, they kept going. Their voices were hoarse, their weapons nearly empty, but they refused to stop. The observer could not look away. Defeat was certain, but their spirit made it impossible to call them weak. Still, deep down, the truth remained. Courage was not enough. Hope was not enough. Humanity's fight was noble, but the outcome had already been written. The observer whispered to himself, though no one could hear, "I watched humans fight, and I knew we couldn't to win." The clash was brutal. Weapons roared, bodies moved with desperation, and every strike echoed like thunder through the ruins of the city. Smoke covered the air. Dust rose with every explosion, and fire lit the broken streets with a cruel red glow. From a distance, it looked like a storm swallowing everything in its path. But to those inside the battle, it was worse. It was chaos. The soldiers shouted to each other, their voices hoarse from hours of fighting. Orders were lost in the noise, drowned out by gunfire and screams. Boots pounded against the cracked pavement, dragging bodies forward even when their strength was gone. Some carried wounded friends on their backs, refusing to leave anyone behind. Others kept reloading, hands shaking, teeth clenched, as if each bullet carried the last piece of their hope. Yet beneath all the noise, beneath the roars and thunder, there was a haunting truth. The humans were not fighting to win. Victory had slipped away the moment the enemy appeared. Their weapons, their walls, their numbers, none of it was enough. Every shot they fired, every charge they made, was not about taking ground. It was about holding on for a little longer. It was survival. Nothing more. The observer watched their faces. Some were hardened with anger, others pale with fear. But in every pair of eyes, he saw the same thing: desperation. They wanted to believe their courage would turn the tide, but deep down, they knew the truth. They were clinging to a hope that was already falling apart. Like a rope fraying thread by thread, it was only a matter of time before it snapped completely. Bodies fell, but the line did not break. One soldier dropped his weapon and stumbled, blood soaking his uniform. Yet another quickly filled his place. A captain shouted for his squad to push forward, even as he bled from a wound in his side. Their courage was real. Their strength of spirit could not be denied. But courage without power is a cruel gift. It burns bright, then vanishes in the wind. The enemy showed no mercy. It moved through the battlefield like a shadow, tearing apart everything in its path. Every time the humans regrouped, the enemy struck harder. Every small victory was answered with crushing defeat. It was a storm against fragile walls, a wave against stone that was already cracking. Still, the humans did not stop. Their bodies gave in, but their will did not. Even when their voices trembled, they shouted. Even when their weapons ran low, they fought with fists and knives. Even when their hope slipped like sand through their fingers, they refused to let it go completely. The observer's heart ached as he watched. He admired them, admired their fire, their unity, their refusal to kneel. But admiration was not enough to change the truth. They were fighting, yes. They were surviving, yes. But survival without victory is only a delay. And no matter how hard they tried, no matter how bravely they stood, the end was already written. And so he whispered into the smoke-filled air, his voice barely a breath. They aren't fighting to win. They're fighting because it's all they have left. In their eyes, the observer saw both fire and despair. Every soldier, every fighter, carried that same mixture. Burning determination tangled with crushing fear. They gave everything they had, pouring their hearts into each strike, each step, each shout. But no matter how much they gave, it was not enough. For every step forward, the enemy pushed them 2 steps back. What little ground they gained slipped away almost instantly. The battle became a cruel cycle. Advance, fall, regroup, and advance again. It was like watching men try to hold back the ocean with their bare hands. Each wave came harder, faster, and soon swept them away. The humans' unity, once their greatest strength, began to crack under the weight of the struggle. In the beginning, they moved together, their voices loud, their formation solid. But as the hours dragged on, the cracks widened. Soldiers became separated in the smoke. Orders were lost in the roar of explosions. Friends looked around for each other and found only empty space. Their voices cracked, too, not just from shouting, but from the strain of despair. Some called for reinforcements that would never come. Others cried out for comrades already gone. The observer heard their words rise and fade into the night, disappearing like sparks in the wind. Each broken voice told the same story. They were running out of hope. Still, they refused to stop. Their dream of victory had begun to fade, yes, but something deeper drove them forward. Pride, defiance, the refusal to give the enemy the satisfaction of an easy win. Even as their strength faltered, even as their unity splintered, they fought on. The observer watched one young man, barely more than a boy. His hands shook as he reloaded his weapon, his eyes wide with terror. But when the enemy charged, he screamed with fury and fired until his weapon was empty. He did not stop, even when he was forced back. His body trembled, but his spirit would not bow. Nearby, a woman dragged her injured comrade through the rubble. Her arms were bloodied, her breath ragged, but she refused to let go. The enemy closed in, and she turned, firing with one hand while pulling him with the other. When her weapon jammed, she used a broken piece of metal as a blade. She was fighting with nothing left but will. These moments struck the observer's heart more deeply than anything else. The humans were not blind to their fate. They could see it in the smoke, hear it in the silence between explosions, feel it in the tremor of their tired hands. Yet they chose to fight anyway. Not for victory, but because fighting was all they had left. The battlefield grew quieter as the night dragged on, not because the enemy slowed, but because fewer humans remained to resist. The cracks in their unity became chasms, their voices fewer, their shouts weaker. Where once hundreds had stood, now only small groups clung together, backs pressed to walls, protecting one another with the last of their strength. The observer's chest tightened with every passing minute. He wanted to believe in them, to believe their courage could change the outcome. But the truth was carved into the ruins around him. Courage alone could not defeat what they faced. Their fire was burning out. Their despair was growing heavier. And their dream of victory, once so bright, was now no more than a shadow. Finally, as the screams of the last charge echoed into silence, the observer lowered his gaze. He had seen the fire in their eyes. He had seen their strength, their unity, their refusal to surrender. But he had also seen how fragile it all was against the storm. Humanity had given everything, and still, it was not enough. And so, in the quiet that followed, the thought pressed hard against his mind. They fought bravely, but bravery does not change fate. That day, the observer understood a truth he had never wanted to face. Humanity's courage was great, greater than anything he had ever seen, but their fate was already sealed. From the very first clash, the end had been written. The battlefield lay silent now, except for the crackle of fires eating through broken walls. Smoke drifted across the ruins, carrying the bitter scent of ash and blood. Where once hundreds of voices had shouted with determination, only whispers of the dead remained. The streets, once alive with the pounding of boots and the roar of weapons, were now still, littered with broken rifles and shattered helmets. The observer stepped forward carefully, his boots crunching against rubble and glass. He looked around at the fallen, at the faces frozen in their final moments. Some had died with eyes wide in terror, others with lips curled into defiant snarls. Every body told a story of resistance, of courage that had burned until its last spark. He remembered the fire he had seen in their eyes. That fire had been real. It had pushed them forward when their bodies begged to stop. It had kept them standing when everything told them to fall. But even fire, no matter how bright, eventually burns out. And here, in this ruined city, the last embers of humanity's fight had been extinguished. The enemy did not celebrate. It did not need to. Victory for them had never been in question. They moved through the battlefield with cold precision, finishing what little resistance remained, sweeping aside the remnants of human defiance. To them, this had been nothing more than another task. But to humanity, it had been everything. The observer's chest tightened as he knelt beside a fallen soldier. The man still clutched a weapon in his hands, though it was bent and useless. His face was pale, streaked with dirt, but there was no fear in his expression, only determination. He had fought until his last breath, and even in death he refused to release his grip. Nearby lay a woman, her body curled protectively around another. The observer realized it was a child, no older than 12, now still and silent in her arms. Tears stung his eyes as he saw the truth of her sacrifice. She had fought not for victory, but for love, for family, for the hope that someone she cared about might live a little longer. Everywhere he looked, the same story repeated. Bravery etched into silence. Sacrifice painted across broken walls. Humanity had not gone quietly. They had left behind a legacy of resistance. And yet, the result was the same. Defeat. The observer stood again, his heart heavy. He had once believed that courage could change anything, that sheer willpower could bend fate. But now he knew the truth. Courage without strength was not enough. Hope without power was only an illusion. Humanity had fought harder than anyone could have imagined, but the outcome had never been in their hands. As the last fires burned, he whispered words he did not expect to speak. I watched them fight, and in that moment, I knew we never stood a chance. The wind carried his voice through the ruins, a quiet echo among the shadows. It felt like a farewell, not just to the fallen soldiers, but to everything humanity had once dreamed of. Their cities, their songs, their endless belief that tomorrow could be brighter. It all seemed so fragile now, so small against the weight of the universe. Yet even in defeat, the observer could not deny the power of what he had witnessed. Humanity had not surrendered. They had not begged. They had faced the impossible and fought it anyway. In their final hours, they had proven something unshakable. That courage is not measured by victory, but by the will to resist even when resistance is hopeless. He would remember that. Even as silence fell, even as shadows swallowed the city, he promised himself that he would carry their story. The world might forget them, the enemy might erase their name, but he would not. He had seen them stand, he had seen them fall, and he had seen them burn with a fire that no defeat could truly erase. That day, he learned that courage and fate are not the same. Courage is a choice. Fate is a sentence. Humanity had chosen courage, even knowing the sentence awaiting them. And that choice, though it could not save them, made them more than victims. It made them eternal. As he turned away from the battlefield, his final thought lingered like a wound in his heart. Humanity's courage was great, but their fate was sealed. They never stood a chance.